Thank you for joining us today. Hacking the Truth avoids the superficial, simplifies the complex, and reveals the hidden truth behind today's deceptions. We rely on personal experience and fearless fact-finding to bring the undeniable truth to you, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Would you want it any other way? And now, here is your host, James Trinkle Clements. Welcome to Hacking the Truth. Please subscribe to our channel. You'll see the little button there on the screen. My guest today is someone I know very well, Michelle Clements Coward. And I guess you can guess by the middle name, it's my daughter. And not only do I want to talk to you about a lot of things, we're going to talk about the business you're in and the travels we've had together and the people you've worked with in the movie business. So tell a little bit about yourself, dear.
Okay. Hello, Father. I'm your only daughter, and my occupation is I work in costuming in film and television. I work on commercials sometimes, but lately mostly in film and TV, and it's a pretty interesting gig, and I've been able to travel a bit and meet some fun and interesting people, and that's what I do for a living.
Located in Orlando, obviously.
I live full-time in Orlando, yes, with my husband and kids, and 2 dogs and a cat. It's a full house, especially during quarantine. And
that's right. Yeah, we're doing this during quarantine.
Yeah,
so you're there with Alan and Chet and Ruby.
Yes.
And we've all been locked down for a while, which was slightly boring after a while. But we're getting out. We actually went to the beach this morning for sunrise.
We did, and saw a beautiful sunrise. It was
great.
It was so good. And it's so good to see you after 2 months.
I know. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
We'll talk about what you do now, but was your start when you started working on my television show that I had, when I had you running the camera? You remember that?
Of course I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, you kind of threw me into that in a good way.
Yeah.
Because you wanted me to see what you did and to be a part of it. And I always had an interest in that. And so you put me behind the camera, and I don't know what kind of camera it was. I just remember
it was a big camera.
It was a big camera, and it was a heavy camera on a tripod. I do remember once because
it rolled around.
I learned how to dolly and pan and all those basic moves, but I remember once that I unlocked it a little too loose. And this was it live?
Yeah, we were live.
Okay. So the weight of the camera as I was loosening the knob, because I was going to, do a little creative camera work and go left to right. The weight of the camera, it just went whoop, and all of a sudden I was filming the cement floor of the studio.
That's right.
I remember I still remember that today. I was so horrified. Just
it didn't
knowing
break.
that I had made a mistake.
Well,
yeah.
you must, yeah. But there's always a lot of mistake in production. But when you go live, there are really a lot of things that
can't
happen.
Be undone. But
no, they can't be undone. Yeah, when I started that show, I actually started on CBS affiliate here in Jacksonville, and then cable came to town, and they asked me to bring it over to cable, which was brand new, and I really didn't want to do that. And then they said, well, we'll give you an hour-and-a-half show live. You got me.
Yeah.
So that's how that whole thing started.
And that was how many years?
That was started in 1980, and the show changed as cable had changed proprietorship and different things happened. It got down to a 30-minute show, but it was live call-in for an hour and a half.
Yeah, I remember you had the old school rotary phone with the buttons that lit up when people called in.
People called in. That's going way back. Started and did that show from 1980 to 2015, 35 years.
Yeah, that's
a long time.
A long time. But what's interesting to me is that when I've told my friends or coworkers about your show, because it is one of the longest running cable access shows in history.
Yeah.
And there's very little on YouTube if you Google what's your opinion, you really can't find anything.
No, it's well, when it was started, obviously there was no internet to speak of. I mean, there were computers and they were just coming of age.
Yeah.
But we really never posted anything. We never promoted the show where it would, be picked up. I did have an article in Fortune magazine.
You did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, had an article in Fortune magazine, and also with one of the people who I became very good friends with, Ted St. Martin, who's a world's record holder in free throw basketball. You were living in New York, and we were on Regis and Kathy Lee.
Yeah, Ted St. Martin. Okay. I was
Yeah,
trying to
remember
think of
that?
his name, and I couldn't remember. Yeah. Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And Regis and Kathy Lee, and met them, and were on that show, and that was nice. And so a lot of good things happened, and I met a lot of, people who were stars then, who many have passed on. So that was a great segue to the show, and so did you, Jay Thomas.
Yes, yeah, I know. I have that photo of me and Jay on my fridge.
And he went on to Mork and Mindy and Cheers, and he was a DJ in L.A. Great guy.
He
Passed
was very
away
sweet.
probably 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, it's way too young.
Yeah, way too young. But it was a start, and I did want to expose you to that. And also, I worked at an advertising agency at the time, and you would go with me when we would shoot commercials.
Yes,
and maybe
that
that piqued your interest. I just wanted you with me at the time to see how things were.
No, it definitely did. And to see that was possible as a way to make a living, because you don't really see that, or at least not in Jacksonville. It's not like you know people that are working actors or work on a crew necessarily. So yeah, it kind of opened my eyes to that as a possibility.
Well, I thought you would have fun, if nothing else, and obviously you did, in meeting the people, and seeing how production worked, which is much more tedious than it is today. We're sitting actually in my house, which I've turned into a studio to do Hacking the Truth, and on YouTube, and also our channel. And so it's just, this is in infancy.
Right.
We just started it, and you might know the minute you start something, the whole country gets locked down, and people are going to interview obviously aren't coming here, and I'm not going anywhere, but you have to deal with those kind of things.
Yeah. It's a strange time for everyone. So
tell our audience when you first got into costuming, and explain what costuming is, because it's a different niche that when you talk about it, even I didn't know till you told me the amount of shopping, the amount of work it takes to do it. So explain what you do.
Okay. Well, the way I got started is I moved to Orlando from Philadelphia, where I lived for a few years, and this Nickelodeon Studios was a working studio within Universal Parks, and in the late 90s, I talked to young people now, PAs that I work with on shows, and I mentioned that I worked on Kenan and Kel and all that, which were big in the time, and they're it's makes me feel old, but they're like, oh, that was my favorite show when I was a kid. But that's how I got started. I worked at Nickelodeon. I came in because we had friends that worked there, and it was just word of mouth, and I got a job working in the art department, and basically as a PA, and a PA is a production assistant, and you just do whatever is needed. But I would watch, and all of these shows had live audiences, which was great too. So they would, have a table read on Monday and rehearse the rest of the week, do a dress rehearsal on Thursday, and then Friday afternoon have a live show with an audience, and they just bring in park goers to come in and watch, and so we all would just stand in the back of the soundstage and watch as well. And so just from talking to people, and
now Kenan and Kel, Kenan's on Saturday Night Live right now.
Kenan Thompson,
correct?
yes, he's on Saturday Night Live.
Seems like a great kid.
He's wonderful. I mean, I haven't seen him much as an adult, but he was a great kid. His mom was always on set with him, Ann Thompson, and he was just a really cool, talented. I mean, you could tell. I mean, you obviously have the talent. You just don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I'm so proud of him. When I see him on Saturday Night Live now, it's pretty cool because I knew him when he was a kid. I mean, I remember when he got his driver's license and started, had his own car and drove on set for the first time and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of neat to have had my start there. And it was the perfect place to start working because it was so much fun. And I just fell in love with everything about it.
And
So
did you work at Disney before or after that?
it was, a little bit before, it was kind of,
Segued into each other?
yeah, I mean, I did start initially at Nickelodeon and then I had my first child. Chet.
I do know Chet, yes.
And so I took a few years off, and then when I went back, I went to Disney because at that point, all of the Nickelodeon shows had moved out to LA, and so and I did do one season of all that in Los Angeles, but we didn't end up moving there, so stayed in Orlando. And after Chet was born, I worked for Disney for a little bit. And but slowly those kind of full-time costuming and production jobs were going by the wayside. So eventually I just became a freelance person, and so then just started working wherever there was work.
Now, let's have you explain your day. You've got your own, let's say, a movie, a television series. It's a period piece, or it's not a period piece. When you get up and you shop for the clothes specifically, or are they provided, or does it depend on the production?
Well, it very much depends on the production. And when you're talking about movies or TV, the jobs are very specific. There are shoppers, and all they do is shop. And I'm mostly in the movie world. I'm a costumer, so I work on set. I will dress either principals or background, depending on whatever role I'm playing at the time. And so at that point, the costumes are already provided. They're shopped for. They've already been fitted on the actors. Everything is set. All I do is prep the costumes or the wardrobe. I make sure that once they're dressed, that everything looks perfect. And then when you're on set, your major job is continuity, to make sure that, small things like if it's buttoned up to the second button, that it stays there. And if there's a tie, it's straight, and just all of those things, because you shoot out of sequence, especially a TV show or a movie. You're not going to shoot it in chronological order. So you also have to make sure that if this actor was wearing this specific costume for day 1, scene 3, then 3 weeks later, if you're also doing day 1, scene 3, they have to be back in the same costume. And you're not the only one that is responsible for making sure they're in the right thing, but
you have a supervisor, and people look over what you're doing, obviously.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know that. Television shows, movies, they're not shot the way you see them. You could be shooting the ending at the start of shooting.
Absolutely.
It's going to depend on weather, timing, other people's schedule, their work schedule. They could be doing TV and doing parts in this movie. And there are times these actors never even see each other, and people don't understand that.
Yeah, if they don't have scenes where they're physically together, you could work on the same show. And if you're not in a scene with that actor, then they might not see each other.
Never see each other.
Yeah. And a lot of it, it depends on if it's exterior shots, and, you may go to whatever the place is and shoot all of the exterior shots for the whole season, and then go back to the sound stages and shoot the rest of it. So it depends on so many factors. So you never shoot in sequence. So.
Well, I do know you worked in, I think, mainly commercials to begin with, because you did about every Tiger Woods commercial with American Express, and various things that you
Back
do.
in the heyday.
Back in the heyday. And Alan, your husband, does the lighting on David Faraday's show.
Yes, he does.
And talks about that. And that's a golf show for people who don't know. And they have just about every golfer or media person who loves golf. It's a very good show, one of my favorite ones. Let's talk about when you started doing a lot of work that did leave Central Florida for various reasons, and we could do a lot better in our film community to bring more work here. I used to be involved in that when it first started, but it seemed to have gone by the wayside. But Georgia has become just a tremendous place to shoot movies and television shows. So you do a lot of work in Atlanta or around Atlanta outside.
Right.
Talk about that.
Yes. Well, for me personally, about 4 years ago, the work here in Orlando slowed down for me quite a bit. And so I just kind of did a little research, and I already knew a few friends who had moved from Florida to Georgia, and talked with some of those friends and other people that I had contacts with in the costume business. And just from that, I eventually, after a few interviews and visits to sets and things like that, I switched from the Florida union to Georgia union, because you have to be in the local union of that state to work in that state. And there was just so much work there that I went to Atlanta. So I basically live half of the time in Atlanta. So I have two homes now. And it's been a great experience. I mean, and also, even though at that time, that was 4 years ago, which is quite a while, Florida is slowly coming back. There are, in the last 2 years, there have been several episodics that have come to Orlando.
Good.
One is an Oprah Winfrey produced. It's called David Makes Man.
Okay.
And that I've heard has done really well. And another one that I think is going to air very soon on Nat Geo is The Right Stuff. So that's an episodic.
Like the Right Stuff movie?
Right.
Oh, I'm going to love that. I love one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah. So look for that. That's I don't know exactly when, but I know the trailer is already out. So they're promoting it. So it probably will be streaming soon on Nat Geo. And I know a lot of people that have worked on that. So it's picking back up in Florida. I don't think it's possible for it to be quite the boom town that Atlanta is, because they just have such an infrastructure. They have so many sound stages and studios, and honestly, they've been doing it for over 10 years now. And Tyler Perry is huge. A huge presence. He has two studios there.
I think they missed the opportunity when it started fading away. They didn't capture it. Georgia picked it up. Like you say, a lot of influential people in the media live in Georgia.
Yeah.
And live around Atlanta. So that's really helped. But it's I like to see more of it come back to Florida, because we are unique in what we have.
No, I agree. Especially North Florida here, which, because you can have the landscape of Georgia with the pine trees, and you can also have the ocean, and everything is within like a 100-mile radius. It really could be. It
lends itself well to movies and television. So. Talking about Florida and hoping a lot of movie business comes back here, and also comparing it to Atlanta. I was in Vancouver, and they were shooting a lot of movies in Vancouver. So it's really all over the, North America, but really in the South, it has really moved to Georgia. So let's talk about some of the projects you've worked on that near and dear to your heart, and some of the people you've met that really made an impression upon you. So we can talk either current ones or one leading up. I know you were on Fast and Furious 8. I remember that.
Yes. Now, that was my first movie in Atlanta. So I was a day player. So that means a day player is not a full-time crew member. So you don't work every single day. You typically for costumers, a day player dresses background because there are certain days where there's going to be a lot of background and they need extra costumers to dress those people. So, and a day player can be an actor too. If you just come in, like say you're a cashier in a store, you might have a line or two, or you might not, but you're a day player. So that was my job on Fast 8. I dressed background, and there were a lot of big background days with military and just crowds and things like that. So
now, who were some of the stars in that movie?
Oh, well, there were it was a lot of big names. I mean, obviously Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson. Fast 8 had Charlize Theron, Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell.
Kurt
You
Russell.
really like Kurt Russell.
I loved Kurt Russell. I mean, he's one of those people that I've always loved as an actor, and seemed to be a really genuine, down to earth person. And so when you meet or in some way come into contact with someone that you've looked up to, then it can either be devastating if they're not what you had hoped they would be. But in his case, he was that and more. I mean, he was very down to earth. He shook everyone's hand, introduced himself as if I wouldn't know who he was. And, but he was very, just the ultimate professional. I mean, you could tell he'd been doing it his whole life. And he also, what I noticed about him is that even when he wasn't in the scene, he would still be on set. He wouldn't run back to his trailer. He would be on set, either going over his lines or just sitting there watching and
still learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, still
he was
learning.
very cool. He was.
And I think you called me, or I talked to you during that production, and you said,
I'm sure.
Charlize Theron had a malfunction or
Oh,
something.
right.
You had to do something on her dress.
Right. Well,
And I volunteered to help, but I couldn't get there in time.
You could not get there in time. No. Well, obviously she has her own costumer and, her own hair and makeup people. But there was a stunt scene between her character and Vin Diesel's character. And there are stunt people that do the actual stunts, but they're in the scene too. And just like things that will happen, her zipper busted, and she's wearing this leather cat suit, and there's no time to change her into a double of the suit. They're in the middle of this fight scene, and so it's just it happens to everybody. The zipper just comes apart, and you have to rework it. But in this case, camera's holding, everybody's waiting. And so and it was probably only my second day on set. And I was a little bit starstruck. I've never been, within 2 feet of these people. But we all had to help. And so one person held their phone and had the flashlight on, and somebody else held the garment together while her costumer was trying to
get the zipper working.
Without having to take the whole thing apart and resew it. And by some kind of magic or miracle, we got her zip back up and were able to move on with the scene. But we were all sweating bullets. But it was cool when it happens. And then the best thing that can happen is that you just don't hold up camera. That's the big thing, is don't hold up camera, because money is being wasted and everybody's waiting. But that's when it's so nerve-wracking, is when everybody's waiting and everybody's watching you.
The tension.
Yeah.
Well, I want to tell you, the other morning, my golf jacket zipper did that same thing, and nobody helped me.
Did no one show up?
No one. You didn't show up. I'm there. It's, with its
all you had
sun's
to do was
coming
call
up.
Dad.
I
would have been
don't
there.
know. That happens.
I know. It happens in real life, and it's no big deal. But yeah.
And so you went from that movie, and there's been several television series and other movies. What are some of the ones that really left an impression upon you?
Well, as far as personal experience, one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite experiences was the Dolly Parton series, Heartstrings. And mostly because I got to meet Dolly Parton, who was one of my idols, and
I love Dolly.
I love Dolly. I mean, who doesn't love Dolly?
Yeah, she's
Something's wrong with
else.
you if you don't love Dolly.
And one of the greatest songwriters ever.
Absolutely.
People don't know how many songs she's written.
And just her voice, just her speaking voice. I mean, just to be on a soundstage and hear her off in the distance talking. She has that little girl angelic voice, and she's, I mean, friendly doesn't even begin to describe it, because she would go out of her way to introduce herself to every department and thank every department for their hard work. And she was always making like self-deprecating jokes. You know, she I mean, she's famous for her sense of humor, and she just was everything and more that I dreamt she would be. I mean, if possible, I was more in love with her after working with her. And she showed up we were shooting the very first episode, and we were maybe 2 days in, and she showed up on set, and there were rumors that Dolly's here. And she surprised. We had a lot of background that day. It was a big courtroom scene. And Kathleen Turner was the actress, the star of this particular episode. But Dolly comes out from behind the set, and the place just goes wild. And she just thanks everyone for all their hard work. And she would, and I saw her time and again, like she wasn't part of every single episode, or she didn't act in every single episode, but she was there quite a bit. And for the episodes that she did perform in, she was always singing for the extras, for everyone. Just always, she would talk to people like they were her best friends, and it was.
She's special.
Yeah,
she's very special.
She really is. She really is.
And being in the business myself and interviewing hundreds of people over the years, there are people who I looked up to and interviewed and did not have that experience.
Right.
And then there are others who
are,
you know, they're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. Some of them are going to be very caught up in what they do and who they are, but it always seems the ones who are the biggest stars actually have the lesser egos, because they're just not that way.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's very specific to the person.
Yeah.
It is true. You don't know what you're going to get, but, and people have bad days, and it doesn't necessarily speak to who they are, as a person always. So, but one thing I noticed with Dolly is that she always made time for people. I sent you the photo of our costume department with Dolly, and that day in particular was close to the last day of shooting. We were on the last episode, and everybody was scrambling to get a photo with her, and every department would gather around her, and she'd take the photo, and then she'd think she was done, and then somebody else would want a photo with her. And as the costume department, we were kind of waiting by the sidelines for our turn, and I would see more and more people and think, she's going to get tired of this. And just our luck, right before it's our turn, she's going to say, okay, that's enough, I'm tired. And that would be fine. I mean, if she had, but she didn't. Until everybody had their photo with her, she stayed there. And
that's great.
And her like 8-inch heels and her tiny little outfit. I mean, she's the smallest person I think I've ever seen.
Well, it's great to hear those stories, and people hear that she is everything you think she is. She's that kind of person. And if you haven't seen Heartstrings, it's great.
It is.
Really, look it up. In 2017, for your birthday, we went to Hollywood, and we went to the Turner Classic Movie Film Festival, which was 3 days, I believe. We flew out there.
Yes.
Or more. We stayed a week, didn't we?
Yeah, we stayed at least 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, we stayed out there and saw. We were hoping to see Robert Osborne, but he happened to pass away just a couple months before the festival.
That's so sad.
But we spent time with Ben Mankiewicz, who is now the premier host of Turner Classic Movies. Mm-hmm. And that was a great experience to go out there.
It was.
What was your impression of that overall?
Well, I mean, I loved every second of it. And we had we had the VIP experience thanks to you, which was lovely. But we've talked about things that we thought they could have done differently or improved on, but just not only seeing movies on the big screen, classic movies that I've only ever seen at home, but the Q&A that they would have before or after with either the director of certain movies, Peter Bogdanovich, and I can't remember all the movies that we saw.
I know, and I'm trying to remember. But like you say, before
The Graduate was the feature of that.
Yeah, The
festival
Graduate was.
That year,
Michael Douglas Jr. was there. No, Michael Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
We didn't get to see him because he was down the street. You can't get to see everything. There's so
Right.
much going on.
Yeah, and so much going on at the same time. You have to pick and choose.
Yeah. And we saw Dick Cavett. He gave a talk, which was very interesting to hear about his experiences. And Lee Grant, who talked about being blackballed in Hollywood during the whole communist thing that went on, which was absolutely crazy. It was interesting to hear about that. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just movies. You got a lot of, you can say, backlot conversation about what really goes on in the movies and has for years. And watching some of the old movies was great.
It was great. And we saw Whatever Happened to Baby Jane at the Roosevelt Hotel poolside.
And that's where they had the first Academy Award celebration, was at the Roosevelt Hotel.
Yes.
And we were out there by the pool, and
that
they played
was
it.
Amazing. That is true old Hollywood.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And they had
That's where I'd like to stay next time if we do it again.
We'll do it again. And we had a pool top party at one of the hotels. I can't even remember where it was. And
Yes.
that was nice.
That was fun.
And then we one of your friends is a director.
Trish C.
And Pitch Perfect 3.
She directed Pitch Perfect 3, yes.
And we went over to her house for dinner, and with a group of other people,
Yeah.
obviously.
She has the greatest family and
they do.
house. And
They are, rather. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun.
that was
What a
fun.
great house. And
Yeah.
all the stuff she and her husband
got
have. Very eccentric.
Chickens and
Everything
fish
running around.
and-
Yeah.
They're all set for the quarantine because they between their garden and the tilapia and the chickens with the eggs, they've got, they don't have to probably ever have to go to the grocery store.
No, I bet they don't.
And and Rue is an amazing baker. He makes bread. He mills the grains himself, and it's unbelievable. The stuff that
He gave me the
creates.
lecture on dead bread. You don't want dead bread.
That's right. I know. and I take it to heart every time I'm there because it's like night and day from the bread that you buy in the grocery store. And then I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. And then I get home and
You don't do it.
life happens and I don't do it.
Let's talk about, you mentioned when we were talking about different things you've been doing last night when we were sitting around talking about Ozark and some of the television productions. Talk about that.
Okay. Well, I guess the most recent things, or two of the most recent things that I worked on that are actually streaming now on Ozark is on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Its third season is streaming now. But again, I date shows, so I jump around. So I haven't necessarily worked on all of these shows all the time, but I got to work a little bit on Ozark for season 3, and then The Outsider, which is another Jason Bateman produced production, as well as Ben Mendelsohn, who stars in The Outsider, which is very, very good. It's based on a Stephen King novel. So those are two of the most fun things I've done. Even though the subject matter is kind of dark, it was fun for me. And
I want to start Ozark.
You really need to.
I watched one of them and I really liked it, but then you've got to say, I'm going to do this and sit down and start doing it. Because if you don't, you just...
Once you start, you pretty much, I think, get sucked in from the very first episode. It's intense. And I know I wasn't which I'm sure most of the audience when it first came out, and you just have no idea what it is, and you start watching it, and it's and then Jason Bateman's character, I don't think had really ever done anything like this before, and so that was surprising too, to see this guy who's usually in comedies, and you know him from maybe Arrested Development, and then he's this very complex, kind of not always the good guy.
Not always the good guy, no.
Character, so it's pretty cool.
That's good. And is that around Atlanta? All that also?
Yes. Both of those were shot in and around Atlanta. And there is a lot of great locations, especially because Ozark obviously is set in the Ozarks, but it's shot around, well, the exteriors anyway, most of it's shot around Lake Lanier in Georgia, outside of Atlanta. And then most of the rest is on a soundstage in Atlanta. So it's amazing what they can do. It can be almost anywhere, any country, any state. So
as far as upcoming projects, I assume everything's pretty much on hold, and
yes.
You haven't heard if Heartstrings is going to continue for another season, or you think it is?
Well, I heard rumors that it was, and I assume that it probably will, because I don't know how well it did as far as ratings or whatever on Netflix, but she's so popular that most of her content is well received. So I think that it was kind of the assumption that it would continue, because obviously, well, every episode's based on a song of hers, and she's got, oh my gosh, hundreds of songs in her library. So there's a lot more to be tapped. So I think, hope it would come back, but for now, it was really like a light switch. One day I was working, and then everything shut down, and we just had to stop and walk away. So, and it's still a big question mark when we're gonna come back.
Let's talk about some of the people you've worked with. And there's a movie you worked on which still hasn't been released, and we wonder if it ever will be, with Robert De Niro. Mm-hmm. And what was the name of that movie?
War with Grandpa.
War with Grandpa. Yeah,
it was based on I can't remember the author of the book, but it was a young person's, like a youth novel, and that had done really well. And it's a great story. It was, 3 years ago now I worked on that. It's been a very long time. And, but Robert De Niro, Uma Thurman is in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And, Cheech Marin.
Of Cheech and Chong.
Yeah, Cheech and Chong. And Christopher Walken is in it. So, yeah,
it could get creepy with Christopher Walken.
He was awesome. But yeah, it just, I have no idea. Every once in a while, I'll Google it just to see if there's any hint that it's going to be somehow released on some platform. But I don't know. Yeah, I know that there were, at the time, an article came out and it listed War with Grandpa, as well as there was a movie starring Nicole Kidman, and there was another movie, like all big name projects that were shelved because of the
coronavirus. Yeah.
Well, no, this was Weinstein.
Oh, the Harvey Weinstein production. Oh,
right,
okay.
Right.
That's what's holding it up.
Yeah. So, those just went away, and so many years later still haven't been released. So I don't know. I guess it's going to have to be maybe purchased by another production company.
Well, I understood his production company, he was selling it or forced to sell it.
I would imagine so.
And picked up by someone else, and all those intellectual properties, who know?
Yeah.
The actors, they've been paid. They got paid for their work.
Oh, yeah. We got paid.
You got paid. So the movie's sitting there. So somebody needs to recoup some of that money, I would think. So hopefully it would.
I would think so
at
some point. Yeah. So yeah, there are some things that you just never see the light of day, and you don't really know why. So.
Yeah. Now, you worked with an actor who just recently, in the last few days, passed away, Brian Dehaney. What movie was that, or was it a TV series he was on?
He was in. Well, I worked with him on a series called Happen Leonard, Brian Dennehy, and he played a retired sheriff in this community, old Southern gentleman, and I worked with him pretty closely, and he was lovely. I mean, he was crusty and didn't, at that age didn't have much of a filter. He let you know if he didn't want to do something or wasn't happy with whatever was going on. But one of the things I remember about him, and I know I've told you this, that he did not like the cowboy boots that he had to wear. That was part of his costume because they were uncomfortable. And so many times in a shot, I would try to give him his cowboy boots, and he would say, "I'm not going to wear them. I'm just not going to wear them." And he had these sneakers, these puffy white grandpa
old
sneakers,
man sneakers, yeah,
with the Velcro across the front. And that's what he wanted to wear. And
Yeah.
he'd say, "You're not going to see my feet. I'm fine. You're not going to see my feet." So most of the time he got away with wearing his sneakers. But that's my favorite memory of him, that he hated those cowboy boots.
He was a very good character actor.
Yeah.
And he was also in First Blood with Sylvester Stallone, and he played a sheriff in that. One of my favorite. One of those movies, if you're channel surfing at night and it comes on, I just have to watch it, like Roadhouse, or there's certain ones you've just got to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
That pull you in. Good Will Hunting. God, if it comes on, I go, here I go. 2 more hours, I've got to watch this. Shawshank Redemption, those kind of movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That movie's famous for being on TV once every 2 weeks or something, but it's one of the greatest
movies. One of the greatest ones. So right now, most businesses, we're starting to open the country up. But we talked about it earlier, when we finally start getting back and you're getting back to shooting whatever television series. We don't know how all that's going to change, how many people are going to be, how do you feed people now? There's not going to be people going through lines grabbing their food. I mean, all these things that have to be worked out. It's a lot of work just to figure the logistics of a shoot now.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that is the great unknown, even though there are lots of documents coming out and guidelines that we're seeing from different production companies, how they're trying to set up how they're going to do things. And everybody has a different idea. I heard that Tyler Perry is going to quarantine his entire crew. Now, I don't know if that's true. I read an article, and who knows, but I mean, he definitely has he has 2 production studios in Atlanta. One of them is a former, either an Army or Navy base. So there's housing on site.
Wow.
So he could technically do that if crew is willing to quarantine for the entire production for however long that is. So that's one theory of how things are going to be going forward, so that you don't have contact with the outside world. But personally, I don't really think that's realistic.
No.
So there's, I really don't know, but I do think that in the short term, there's going to be smaller crews, and they're going to limit contact. And so it's going to mean less work, because they won't be hiring as many people for jobs. So it's just a waiting game, and hoping for the best. I don't know.
I think the whole country feels that way. I don't care what business you're in or where you've been working. What is the new norm? And nobody knows. We're just getting into this. States are opening up. Are we going to have a spike in cases? Are we not? I mean, this is still new. This is basically the middle of May. I don't think we'll have a handle on what's really happening to probably the beginning of July, and we can have some idea. So things are going to change.
Yeah.
Getting back to normal that we had before, I don't think it'll ever be back the way it was before. People are going to be so on guard. I mean, traveling by airplane, who wants to get on a cruise ship right now? I mean, really, and those kind of things. So it's going to take years to recover.
I think you're right. I mean, I don't think that we'll never be back to, well, I mean, I hate that term, the new normal, but I think that will just be kind of a progression. But eventually, I would hope it would be. I mean, there was the Spanish flu in 1918, and we eventually got back to whatever normal was after that.
Yeah, it will. I mean, but what I mean by that, things will change. It will never go. Certain things, not everything. It's like when I was growing up back in the stagecoach era. But I mean, you can just go to an airport, walk out, get on an airplane. It was just nothing. There was no security there, and that was for a lot. Boy. 9/11.
You could smoke on airplanes then too, right?
You could. But 9/11 came, and now the shutdown has just been, tremendous about the security getting on a plane. So that will never go back.
Right.
That will always be.
Yeah,
but
you're
I mean, not necessarily, but things will be put in place that will probably never go away.
Yes.
I don't think it'll be carte blanche, but it'll be certain precautions you have to take, people coming in to the country. Well, when things crank back up, I know you have no idea where you'll be going. Probably back to Atlanta will be my guess in some shape or form. Well, in the meantime, you're home. What have you been doing? We've all been locked down for going on 2 months now. You've been painting, gardening. What have you been up to?
I have been painting. You know that I'm a paint by number freak. I love my paint by numbers. So I've been sewing. I've been making masks.
Now, talk about paint by numbers. It's not your normal paint by number.
Well, sometimes it is, but I did make one for you that they can be very intricate and not come out looking like a paint by number, not a typical paint by number that.
Well, we're going to show your paint by number. Yes, we are. It will be inserted in the broadcast.
But just like adult coloring books and things like that people are into now, and all the crafts that people are doing now that they're home all the time, jigsaw puzzles. And so I know there's definitely been a resurgence of paint by number. I see people doing it all the time. I've been doing it for years, but whatever. But
you were a pioneer in paint by number.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't, a grandpa in the 50s in his basement doing a paint by number, which I have a few of those that I bought at thrift stores. But yeah, it's one of my loves for sure. And so I've been doing that, binge watching shows, some that I've worked on, some that I haven't, movies, a lot of TCM, reading, spending time with my daughter. Your granddaughter is 17, and so
I know they're growing up.
Yeah, so been spending a lot of time with her. That's been great. Yeah, not so much gardening. Now I do. I was telling you yesterday. I don't think I inherited your green thumb, but I'm willing to give it another try.
Okay, we can give it another try. I'll help you. I bet you can do it.
Okay, we'll try. And if I could grow one rose, I'd be happy.
Oh, I can get you growing roses. That's my specialty.
I know, but that's. And one of my best friends, Tara in Atlanta, has the most beautiful garden. And I mean, she and her husband Aaron, who are family to me, and I stay with them when I'm in Atlanta. They have, and I've told you about them, the most amazing house and yard and tiki oasis. So they're my idols, and I tried to I definitely copied her and everything that she does. but yeah, so I'm just doing all those things to stay busy.
Getting back to the paint by number. Now, I did that as a kid because that's when it came out, was in the 50s.
Yeah.
But you can send a picture in.
Right.
Explain. People may not know this. You can do family members. You can do your dog. You did your dog, right?
Right.
Did you do William?
I painted William, yes.
Did William.
Sweet William. Yeah, there's probably several websites now, but you can send in a photograph and they will create paint by number. I will do just I'll pay the extra to go to a website, and they send you the whole kit, paints and all. There are probably all kinds of software where you can just upload a photo and print out a paint by number template, and that's much cheaper. And then you just buy your own paints and do it yourself. So there's so many ways to do it, but that's fun
cool.
because you can make it personalized. And I've done that for friends, mostly pets of friends, and so I've gifted that to a few people over the years, and that's nice to do something personal like that.
That's a great gift. I think we should get the three hosts of Hacking the Truth together for a portrait. That would be scary, right, yeah. Justin? Justin goes, yeah, that'll be scary.
That's doable.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what we'd look like. And we'll argue over who's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know that. But how about making a deal with me that as you're working on different projects, we'll stay in touch, but you'll come back in and take some photographs and keep us up to date on the projects you're working on, and just keep checking in. And we can do it for the podcast, or when you're in town, we'll do it for the YouTube broadcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Of course. I hope I'll be working again one day soon. I'll have something to talk about.
You'll have some money. That's it.
Yeah, that too.
That too. Well, thank you, darling.
Thanks, Dad.
Okay. Enjoyed it. Great. Thanks for being with us on Hacking the Truth.